What a Catch, Part 41, a Miraculous Ladybug Fanfiction. If you have not heard the previous 40 parts of this story, you can find a link to them in the description box below. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and comment down below in support of more fanfiction. Adrien sat at the bar, waiting for Mystery Girl to arrive. It was now half an hour past the proposed time, and he thought that, perhaps, he had the wrong location. He sighed and pulled out his phone for the umpteenth time to check for an update from Alia. Like the last 36 times he checked, there were no new messages. From her or Marinette. As he hit the power button to turn off the screen, he saw the scar on his chin reflected in the glass. It was less noticeable now than it was a few years ago, but it was there. Proof that he was Cat Noir. His thoughts turned back to 2 nights ago when Hawkmoth reappeared. If the suit protected him from damage, with the insurance of Ladybug's lucky charm fixing any possibility of getting hurt, how is it he got a scar the night Hawkmoth disappeared all those years ago? Why is it that Ladybug thought she dropped him from the Eiffel Tower when his memory was constantly reminding him that he was the one who dropped her 300 meters? There's nothing like the guilt of hurting a loved one to throw a man off his pursuit of happiness for a few years. But he needed to know. He needed to know why there were discrepancies between him and Ladybug's memories. Was it Hawkmoth? And Akuma? Some other force neither of them could remember? He felt his pocket buzz and glanced down to see a text from Alia. He felt silly for leaving her multiple voicemails, but waiting for a blind date is never a comfortable experience, especially when he didn't know what the other party looked like. Hey, handsome. I hate to say you're getting stood up, but, well, you are. Sorry. He rolled his eyes at her message and flagged the bartender to close out his tab. The remaining time he had was too precious to squander, and Adrien was upset that he wasted it waiting around for a pointless meeting. He was going to meet Ladybug in a few hours, and still had to find his faux suit from his teenage years. If he could even fit into it. He may have stopped modeling after scarring his face, but his upper body could make anyone doubt that. Simply put, his figure was a lot fuller than his teenage frame, rippled with muscles trained with so much precision that he would never lose someone precious again, based on physical strength alone. His build was still on the slender side, but he was fast and strong. He had been training for revenge for the last 5 years, after all. Hawkmoth would learn not to underestimate Cat Noir. Adrien stood up, stretched, and walked out. He was a few blocks away from his apartment, but instead of continuing to it, he took a left, rekindling old emotions as he got closer to his destination. Come to think of it, he thought to himself, when was the last time I was here? The creaking of the gate spooked him as he put in the code to unlock it. Even though he wasn't inside yet, he could feel his insides churning, reminding him that he had abandoned his father and his city for New York instead of dealing with his problems head on. The house was as still as he left it, so quiet you could hear your heartbeat. The Agreste mansion hadn't been one for noise in at least a decade, but the lack of it emphasized the emptiness inside. Adrien slowly went up the staircase, taking in the familiar sights of his childhood home. Besides a fresh layer of dust, nothing had changed. As he caught his reflection in a decorative window, Adrien froze. It looked like, for a moment, his father was there. His father was staring back at him like he always had, unable to portray how he felt about his family. Since when do I look so much like my father? Adrien thought. He was the spitting image of a young Gabriel Agreste. Was this the face his mother fell for? He was about the age his parents were when they eloped. Sighing, he pressed onward to his bedroom. The door took a bit of pressure to open, but once it did, he was surrounded by decade-old anime posters and books in languages he had dipped his studies into. It was a shell of his old life. There was nothing in there, materially speaking, that he cared about. There were no photos of friends or family to be seen. He had moved them to his cave the night he got into the biggest fight of his life with his father. He stood there an extra moment before shutting the door on his childhood. Step by step, he made his way to his father's room. It was a bit daunting, to be honest, as he hadn't been inside since before his mother left. What was it like? What was inside? The door opened into a monochrome world with teal borders. It was like his father to keep things straightforward and modern when it came to furniture. That's something they actually agreed on. But his mother's presence was all over the room. She loved all shades of blue, and the pops of color on the drawer handles and around the edges of the mirror were obviously her doing. I wonder where she is. The thought stung his heart. Slowly, as though he might get caught by some unknown being, Adrien made his way over to his father's nightstand and tugged at the handle. It was locked, as he should have presumed, but that was a minor detail. He had learned how to pick locks in junior high after his bicycle was stashed behind the indoor gate. He went to get one of his mother's bobby pins from off her nightstand and went to work, sighing when the satisfying sound of pins clicking hit his ears. There wasn't much inside. A notepad with some numbers scrawled on it, a couple of purple pens, his mother's brooch, and a pocket-sized journal. The notepad was all he needed. It had the combination to the safe. But, for some reason, curiosity enveloped Adrien as he eyed the little leather journal. What was it? Did his father keep a journal? He took off the elastic band holding the book shut. Did he want to know? Did he want to know what was inside? He traced his fingertips over his father's handwriting. The penmanship was so familiar and foreign at the same time that it took him off guard. The page he was on was about his mother, and Adrien felt his throat begin to close up as he read his father's words. They were of love for his wife and his sense of helplessness in raising his son. Tears stung his eyes as he threw the book back in the drawer and slammed it shut, refusing to allow his father to guilt-trip him from the grave. He wasn't allowed to do that. He wasn't allowed to be human. Adrien tore off the paper from the notepad and left in a huff, upset at his father's words. How could he tell an inanimate object all the things Adrien had craved to hear his entire life so casually, instead of saying it to his face? It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair! No time to dwell on it, he thought. I need to hurry. It It was up to him to come prepared with new information for Ladybug, and, by some twist of fate, his father was one of the few people who had answers when it came to Hawkmoth. He may not be alive anymore, but his safe was still untouched by the lawyers and greedy friends of the family. It was time to get the answers. Thank you so much for listening. Part 42 will be available shortly. In the meantime, you can check out the other videos below for more fanfiction. I'll catch you next time.